Hello and thanks for watching. This is a picture video tutorial on making the So Chic Handbags Danielle Dome Satchel. See the top of the pattern instructions for directions on cutting out your fabric. Now, let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe. First, we'll work on your handles. Get your 2 handle pieces and 4 O-rings. Pull each handle piece through 2 O-rings. Place the ends of each handle together and clamp in place. Sew the ends of the handles together along the 0.5-inch seam allowance. Open the seam allowances and lay them flat. Top stitch the seams down about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from the original seam. Lay your handles flat with right sides of the fabric facing and the seam in the center of the handle. Pull each O-ring to the far ends of each handle. Align and clamp one long side in place. Sew along one long side of the handle along the 0.5-inch seam allowance. Stop sewing 1 to 1.5 inches from each O-ring. Open your handle and lay it flat so that the wrong side is facing up. Begin folding in the unsewn seam allowances into the center of the handle so that they meet the sewn seam allowance. Continue folding in the seam allowances along the length of the handle, even through the O-rings. Fold your handle in half and clamp it in place as shown. Using an extended stitch length, top stitch around the perimeter of the handle at about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Sew the long, unsewn side first. Then sew across one O-ring about 1 inch from the folded edge, down the other long side, and across the second O-ring. I do not recommend backstitching here. Instead, leave long strings and use a needle to pull your strings to one side of the handle, then tie them off. Sew the other handle in the same way. Next, get your 2 strap pieces and 2 claw clasps. Pull one strap piece through both claw clasps. Now clamp the ends of the 2 strap pieces together, forming one long piece. Prepare your strap as you did the handle. Sew the ends together. Then top stitch down the seam allowances. Place the seam allowances together in the center of the strap with right sides of the fabric facing. Pull the claw clasps to either end of the strap. Sew one long side, then fold in your seam allowances. Top stitch around the perimeter of the strap using an extended stitch length 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Get your 4 tab pieces. Yours will be a little longer than those pictured. Fold in the seam allowances on both long sides of the tabs and clamp them in place. Top stitch the seam allowances down. Do this for all 4 tab pieces. Your handles, strap, and tab pieces should look like this. Now we'll begin attaching your handles to the external fabric body panels. Get your front and back body panel pieces and interfacing, tabs, and handles. Place your interfacing on the wrong side of the back and front body panel pieces and clamp them in place. Turn one body panel piece over with interfacing clamped to the wrong side and draw a line down the center of the panel. You may already have this if you trace the pattern on your interfacing with a pen. Place your ruler horizontally 2.5 inches from the top of the panel. Then mark 2 1-inch long lines that begin 2.5 inches from either side of the center line. Use your scissors or a blade to cut along the 1-inch lines through the interfacing and fabric. Pull your tab pieces through the slits so that the unfinished sides of the tabs are facing up and the ends are aligned with the top edge of the panel as shown. Sew the tabs to the panel at about 1/8 of an inch above the slits to hold them in place. Now pull your tabs through the O-rings on your handles. Be sure to orient the handles so that the seam will be on the bottom when holding the bag. Pull your tabs through the slit in the fabric, but not the interfacing. Fold back the fabric and interfacing. You'll notice that naturally some of the fabric on the panel pushes out in the direction of the tabs as shown. Sew the small ledge of fabric that is puckering out of the tab. Now pull your tabs through the interfacing. Your panel should look like this. Sew underneath the slit about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from the tab to secure the tabs of the handles to the panel as shown. Now get your rivets or Chicago screws and leather hole punch. Punch holes about 0.5 inches below the tabs and centered. You are punching through the front panel, interfacing, and the tabs in the back. Install your Chicago screws or rivets per your manufacturer's instructions. For rivets, you'll need a rivet tool and hammer. Push the rivet through the hole and install the cap. Then place the curved end of the rivet tool on top of the rivet. Use your hammer and strike down on the tool to lock the rivet in place. It should not wiggle when you place the rivet between your thumb and forefinger. Your panel should look like this. You can cut away one of the tab ends if your rivet is short. Repeat the steps above to install your other handle and tabs on the other body panel. Set your body panels aside and get your front and back body panels and pocket pieces in lining fabric. I recommend fusing SF101 or some other medium weight stabilizer to the wrong side of the lining body panels, but this is optional. Place one pocket piece 2 inches below the top of either body panel. The pocket piece should be centered and right sides of the fabric facing. Pin the pocket in place. I chose the front body panel, but you can install your zipper pocket on the back body panel per your preference. Draw a rectangular box 3/8 to 1/2 inches high, 1.5 inches below the top of the pocket, and 1 inch from either side of the pocket. Draw 2 triangles on either side of the rectangle with their points facing inward. Draw a line in the center connecting the points of the 2 triangles. Using a regular stitch length, sew around the perimeter of the rectangle you drew. Cut along the line in the center of the rectangle and along the legs of the triangle. Try to get as close to the corners of the rectangle as possible without cutting through your sewing. Pull the pocket through the hole that you made to the other side of the panel. Iron the window you made flat as shown. Sew the open end of your zipper shut. Place the zipper behind the window and pin it in place. The zipper should be closed and the pull flush to one side of the rectangle. Sew around the perimeter of the rectangle at about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, securing the zipper to the pocket. Turn the panel over and place your remaining pocket piece on top of the first with right sides of the fabric facing. Pin in place. Sew the 2 pocket pieces together. Note you are just sewing the pocket pieces together and not the pocket to the body panel. Now we are ready to begin assembling the bag. Get your front and back body panels in external fabric and 20+ inch zipper. With your zipper face down on the right side of the front body panel, clamp the long edge of the zipper to the top of the panel. The zipper pull should be about 1.5 inches below the left shelf or wing of the panel. Let the long tail of the zipper extend past the shelf or wing on the right side of the panel. Try to keep the ends of the zipper parallel to the wings of the body panel. Sew the zipper to the body panel at slightly less than the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Begin sewing 1/4 inch below the left shelf or wing. Then sew along the top curve of the panel. Then stop sewing 1/4 inch below the shelf on the right. Now get your lining fabric front body panel and paper pattern piece. Trim off the seam allowances in the corner of the left and right shelves of the paper pattern piece, as shown. Then trace the seam allowance onto the wrong side of the lining fabric panel. Place your lining front body panel on top of the external fabric front body panel with right sides of the fabric facing. Align and clamp the top edge in place. Sew the lining to the external fabric panel, beginning 1/4 inch below the shelf using the seam allowance you traced as a guide. Sew all the way to the right side and sew 1/4 inch past the shelf. Note you are not sewing on the horizontal lines of the shelf, just the curved vertical lines. Draw a diagonal line from the corner of the seam allowance to the corner of the fabric as shown. Then cut along the diagonal line. Make small relief cuts into the curved seam allowances on the top of the bag. This will help the zipper to lay better after top stitching later. Now turn your panel right side out. Find the point on your zipper just below the seam allowance of the shelf. Then hand sew the end of the side of your zipper with the pull closed at this point as shown. Now fold back the external and lining body panels at the point where the shelf begins with the zipper in between the two pieces. Because you snipped the diagonal line in the corner, a mini tab should be sticking out on the zipper on either side, already marked with the seam allowance. Make sure the zipper pull is above the shelf. Sew along the seam allowance of this tab to secure the zipper in between the shelf of the external fabric and lining. Unfold the lining and external fabric body panel. Your zipper should be encased inside the shelf as shown. Repeat this on both sides of the panel. You can now trim off your excess zipper. Now we are ready to top stitch your zipper. Smooth down the top edge of the panel and shelves at the zipper ends and clamp them in place. You may find it easier to top stitch with the zipper open. Top stitch across both shelves and along the top of the body panel at 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the zipper. Now get your external fabric back body panel. With right sides of the panels facing, clamp the back body panel to the other side of the zipper on the front body panel. Starting at the top stitching on the shelf on the left side of the panel, just below the zipper, sew the back body panel to the zipper, going all the way around until you reach the top stitching on the shelf on the right side. Now fold back the lining and clamp the remaining sides of the external body panels together as shown. Sew the sides of the body panels together along the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Stop sewing a stitch before you get to where the lining and the external panels meet. Now get your lining back body panel. With right sides of the fabric facing, clamp the top edge of both lining fabric body panels together. Sew the lining body panels together, stopping at the top stitching in the corners as you did before. Make relief cuts into the seam allowances along the curved edges, being careful not to cut through your sewing. Now clamp the bottom sides of the lining body panels together. You are not going to sew these to the external body panels. You will just sew the lining pieces together. Sew the bottom sides of the lining panels together. Try to sew as close as you can to where the stitching ends on the top curve. You will likely have 0.5 to 1 inch remaining that you cannot reach with your sewing machine. Carefully hand sew these sections together. Now get your external fabric bottom panel and interfacing. Clamp the interfacing to the wrong side of the bottom panel. Mark the center points of the body panels and bottom panel. With right sides of the fabric facing, align the center marks and clamp the long edges of the bottom panels to the bottom edge of the body panels. You don't need to clamp both sides at one time. If you find this cumbersome, do one at a time. Sew the long sides of the bottom panel to the body panels along the 0.5 inch seam allowance, but do not sew into the seam allowances at either end of the bottom panel. Now clamp the sides of the bottom panel to the sides of the body panels. You can make relief cuts into the corner seam allowances of the bottom panel to make it easier to align and sew. Sew the sides of the bottom panel to the sides of the body panels. Trim off the seam allowances to reduce bulk. Turn your bag right side out and confirm you are happy with your seams. Turn the external bag wrong side out and pull out the lining body panels. Find the center points and pin the long edges of the lining bottom panel to the bottom of the body panels as you did before. Right sides of the fabric should be facing each other. Sew the long edges and sides of the bottom panel to the body panels, but this time leave a 6 to 8 inch hole in one long side for turning the bag right side out later. Using the hole in the lining for access, turn your bag right side out. Smooth all seams. Clamp the remaining top edge and top stitch along the zipper at 1/8 of an inch from the edge. You'll want to top stitch into the shelf at either end as shown. Pull out the hole in your lining. Fold in the seam allowances of the hole and clamp the hole shut. Slip stitch the hole shut or simply sew on top. Attach the claw clasps of your strap to the O-rings on either side of your bag. Enjoy your new bag.